right, let's finish off with chapter 12 now. And we've just looked at China and how the Neolithic Revolution that we've already looked at developed in a couple of places in China, then eventually led the way to complex urban state-level society emerging there as well. And we've looked at how that happened. But China, as a center of agriculture, a center of urbanization, also influenced some of the areas around it. First of all, let's look at Japan. We've seen the Jomon culture, and they didn't really get into the whole domestication thing. They were sedentary, though. They were hunters and gatherers, but they seem to have, in the Jomon period, which was like a 10,000 year long stretch of time, the Jomon period, they didn't develop domesticated plants or animals, but it seems to have been abundant enough for them to have been able to develop sedentism, that they stayed put in one place and were able to forage for food and hunt animals in enough capacity to have sustainable sedentary communities of some size as well. But eventually domestication, food production, and the growth of communities started to take hold, probably influenced from China. And in fact, we see in the Kofun period, from about 250 to 710 AD, we see a state starting to emerge with this new food-producing society, and actually there is a Chinese figure that's part of the culture that is brought in with this establishment of state-level society in Japan. So not just the agriculture and the idea of a state probably coming from China, but also some ideological influence as well. So the Queen Mother of the West in iconography is brought in as a figure of idolization and part of the iconography and probably ideology. So you see in the Kofun period in Japan the establishment of elite society as well. So you have, especially in the burial of the elites, you have these massive keyhole-shaped tombs, one of which I've got a photograph of that's sometimes surrounded by water that has the burials right in these tomb complexes. And the burial goods include triangular rimmed bronze mirrors, and these are elaborate bronze elite objects that indicate status. And so these are sort of badges of your elite status that we see starting to emerge in this period, and they are included as burial goods for the elite. And so the more and the better quality these are, the higher status you are. And so these are to indicate who's important and who's not important. And so this seems to be the origin of state-level identity and organization in Japan, probably influenced by Chinese state that had already existed for some time before this. Also, much further to the west, in sort of Central Asia, and we have the Tarim Basin, and the Tarim Basin is bounded by the Tian Shan Mountains in the north and the Himalayas in the south. I have a map that, or actually a satellite image that you can sort of see it just offset to the left side of that view of Asia, and it's that big sort of blank spot on the map, the sort of big sandy tan area, sort of an oval. That's the Tarim Basin. And it was a good route because you don't, to go from the east to the west, the east, China and places had various goods that like silk, for instance, that was really indigenous to that area, and you didn't find it outside of that area very much. Also, it wasn't just that the silk existed there, because it does exist. Silk does exist elsewhere too, but it was the use of it to make particular items of elite goods that were sought after and traded further to the west. So how do you get from Eastern Asia to Western Asia? Well, you can go the southern route through India and the Indus Valley. We've looked at that already. But there's also, like I said, in between the Tian Shan Mountains and the Himalayas. You don't want to cross those, but you can go through the Tarim Basin, and this seems to have been a pretty major route for East-West Asian traffic. As you might imagine, on a route like this, you have connections between East and West. So they have mummies that have been found at the Yingpang Cemetery. Tomb 15 in particular has a very well-preserved mummy with garments that show trade and cultural diffusion from China into the West, and likewise from the West coming back into the East. Also to the south, in Cambodia, in the southern Mekong Plain, in modern-day Cambodia, we have the site of Angkor. And Angkor was established between about 802 and 835 and abandoned in 1431 AD. So this is about 600 or so years old, or it was abandoned about 600 or so years ago, I should say. The Angkor site is enormous and impressive. It covers 35 square kilometers. It's just huge. And the Mekong Plain is frequently flooded. There's a lot of water there, and so a primary purpose of Angkor was to control water, and that's why it's such a huge site. Is it's lots of canals, streets, all gridded and pre-planned. They had intensive agriculture, which was mainly rice production, and a complex irrigation system. So this rice production, of course, was first invented in China, and so this is all coming down into the south, into what's now Cambodia. And the Angkor city and its contemporaries were associated with this large-scale rice production in a complex irrigation system, and a city that was sort of laid out around this type of production. And things like temples and basins are all associated with the power of the ruler. And so you have a very hierarchical social structure with temples, basins, tombs, all associated with this power structure. So you have this southern Silk Route as well, that Angkor wasn't just an island that was operating on its own. You have connections to the east and west through this. You had the Tarim Basin in the north, but you also had through what's now India on the south. And also, I've mentioned this before, maritime routes. You have ships that are sailing to the Middle East and Africa from across the Indian Ocean, from the Indian subcontinent and that sort of thing, to East Asia. And so the Silk Route was both overland and maritime. And it's not just goods that are being traded, you also have ideas. So you have, at places like Angkor, you have an interesting confluence of Hinduism and Buddhism, and you can find things like the Shiva linga stones, which are sort of phallic objects relating to Hindu religion, appearing in both, of course, India and in relation to Hinduism, but you also find these at places like Cambodia and Thailand. You have these linga stones, and in a place where Buddhism has also caught hold as well. You also have some other sites, such as Noan Uloke. This is in Thailand. It's a large Iron Age settlement that dates from about 300 BC to about 200 AD, and elaborate burials, so probably some elite emergence of elites at this Iron Age settlement in Thailand. Also, Ok Eo in Vietnam, dating from about 100 to 550 AD, and this was a city. And it was also a trading center with a complex canal system, so as well. And then also in Cambodia, contemporary with Ok Eo in Vietnam, you have a city in Angkor Borai, which has civic architecture, large religious monuments, and that sort of thing emerging. And all of these are on the sort of the edges, the outer peripheries of what was really taking place in China. All of these are founded on the original domestication and sedentism that China established in a couple of places in the Neolithic Revolution. They started to emerge as urban centers in the Bronze Age, and then we see that influencing some of the areas around it through trade for places further to the west, acting as crossroads, and also influenced in the northern and southern routes, but also in things like ideology, religion, and that sort of thing being shared amongst these peripheral groups. Okay, so that's all for Chapter 12. I'll catch you next time. See you then.